Welcome back to the Presbyterian and Reformed Churchman. This conversation we're about to have is one that is going to be very informational and encouraging to sessions and pastors alike. I have Chet Lilly, who's the Vice President of Operations at Geneva Benefits, the PCA's. He's going to tell us all about it, but basically it's like a human resource organization, but they do so much more. And he's also a ruling elder at Westminster Pres in Atlanta. Chet, thanks for being on.
Absolutely. Glad to be here. Thanks for reaching out.
Yes. So the reason I want to have this conversation is, and I've told Chet some of this before too, but I just recently opened up a 403B plan through Geneva Benefits. And my wife and I have always had Roth IRAs, and that's kind of how we did it. But we wanted to see if there's a way to put a little bit more away. And so, but I had a lot of misconceptions about what Geneva could do for pastors. We don't have a whole lot of staff. A lot of churches only have a solo pastor and often think, well, I can't have various human resource things that a corporation would have because we don't have enough employees. And that's just not true. I was able to open up an individual 403B plan as a part of Geneva Benefits and through payroll deduction now. And there's amazing things that I didn't even know benefits to me now that I have that 403B. And so I said, man, I wonder if there's a ruling elder there. So I went to the website. Listeners know I like to have these conversations with REs. But Chet, why don't you tell us about a little bit about your background before Geneva Benefits and then what you do at Geneva Benefits?
Sure, yes. I graduated from the University of Alabama with a double major in history and economics, and then I went straight into MBA school at Samford University in Birmingham, got my MBA, and started in banking as an internal auditor. So for a few years I worked there auditing banks, and then I moved over to Bell South division of AT&T to work there for a number of years also as an internal auditor. And Bell South is the one that moved me from Birmingham, Alabama to Atlanta as they were moving and changing divisions or cities. But while I was in Atlanta, I really started getting more into my work as a Christian, Reformed theology. I felt drawn, called to the ministry more so than just being involved at the local church. I looked at going to seminary, but at the same time, I received an actual phone call that preceded my call to, at the time it was PCA Retirement and Benefits, to say, hey, have you ever thought about working for the PCA? At the time, it was called Insurance Annuities and Relief, just then changing its name to PCA Retirement and Benefits. And I said, no, but that could be what I was sensing, this call to work in the church. So I actually came to PCA Retirement and Benefits, started there as a marketing person, going out, reaching out to churches, visiting presbyteries, presenting to churches, and then I've developed in the organization. I have my internal audit background. I'm a CIA, which is a certified internal auditor. So I moved more into the administration and operations side of things. And we had our name of PCA Retirement Benefits for 20 years. And a couple of years ago, we rebranded as Geneva Benefits Group. And that's where we are now.
Well, thank you for that. When did you? So were you hired by Geneva or whatever it was called before you were in a PCA church, before you were a ruling elder?
No, I came to Christ in Birmingham at Briarwood.
Okay.
When Bell South moved me to Atlanta, I joined Westminster. I was working at Bell South in Birmingham while I was at Briarwood, working at Bell South in Atlanta initially for a number of years while I was at Westminster. So I first was a deacon, and then a few years later was nominated for elder.
Okay, great. And I love how you're able to use your studies, your giftings, how the Lord has wired you to help within our denomination, and particularly pastors who are hired, because as you and I had been discussing, there's a real gap in the hiring practices and human resource side of things with pastors. Sessions often are not equipped, particularly of smaller churches that don't have like multiple employees. So the staff is going to be the pastor. Maybe there's a part-time like custodian or church secretary. And so pastors get hired and, they don't really teach this in seminary, although I think some may have some helps in this regard. But it's very complicated, a pastor's hiring for the average person and for people who don't know. So you could have good sessions with, some good business practices, but have no idea that pastors have things like dual tax status and, how to handle their payroll taxes, which are SECA, but their payroll is almost it's like a W-2 employee. And it's just, and I have heard horror story after horror story of guys that hadn't dealt with their taxes properly. And actually it's always awkward. It's just weird to me that they could go a couple years before they figure that out. Like, I don't understand how the auditing isn't, but the IRS wants theirs. And then what I've noticed too, Chet, is a lot of churches, particularly solo pastor church situations, they just have a bucket of money. We can give, you get what I'm saying? So we can give X amount of dollars to hire this pastor, and now it's up to the pastor to decide how much of that they want to go to health insurance, how much of that, if any, they want to go to retirement, how much should go, it's, and you can understand that because again, a small church.
Absolutely. And any church has that situation. Every church has that situation where you have a pool of money, a budget that you have to align with what your ministry is associated around. A large part of that is going to be the salary for the staff. If it's a church plant or solo pastor, it's the one individual. But we do not recommend giving that lump sum of money to the individual. The reason is there are tax benefits. If the church, the employer pays those, you can have some definite tax benefits where the employer is paying those and not the individual who's having to go out and find these himself. The other issue is the individual churches, even though we serve over 1,000 PCA organizations and other ministry organizations, we can take something that's very complex using our resources and individualize it for the local pastor or the local church. We can actually take something and explain it to the investment and insurance world. This is what pastors deal with. This is how our church works. And then explain to the church world, this is how investing works. This is how insurance works. So we work with you. You're showing a slide here of church budgets and compensation packages. That's one of the resources that we provide. We provide retirement services, retirement plan, insurance services, relief and ministerial well-being services, but also a whole slate of services such as developing call package guidelines and other resources that churches or pastors or presbyteries can use to develop a good compensation for their ministers.
And sorry if I was distracting you as I was going to the website. I wanted to show people who watch this on YouTube just the great resources that reflect some of what you've said. I mean, so pastors, a lot of churches, the sessions, some sessions unfortunately have to hire a lot of pastors because of the turnover and maybe their longevity on the session. But a number of them, maybe it was a founding pastor and they're going to leave in, 10 years after, and the session now has to figure out how to hire somebody and pay them. Well, GenevaBenefits.org has great resources right there on the website to guide people through that. There's checklists, there's what you should consider. And I think,
and you're looking at the website there, who we serve. The second tab over on that front page is we're serving individuals, ministers, and individuals. We're serving churches, and we're serving. We talk about pastors, ministry staff, and church administrators. Well, we're also broadening that out to just the individuals themselves, the churches, and then the presbyteries. because they're very different roles and functions of how they coordinate benefits. The presbytery is going to help, the credentialing and bringing in and approving the call. The church is the organization that's going to pay that person. But also the individuals themselves, they need to understand and use these benefits, the retirement program, the insurance programs, et cetera. So they're different in how we reach out to them. But we try to start this in seminary. We try to encourage presbyteries and individual pastors, first, don't opt out of Social Security. We think it's a valuable offering. If you don't opt out of Social Security, that's great. If you have, we try to figure out ways that you can cover that. But the second thing is to get involved in a retirement program. Save 10 to 15% of your money. If you're out of Social Security, that becomes 25 to 30% of your income. For churches, make sure you're providing a decent salary, decent housing allowance. Where do you want your pastor to live? Do you want them to live near the church? Then it needs to be a salary that's commensurate with that area. And make sure you understand this FICA, SICA. You raised that early on. The Social Security is divided up, and whether you're self-employed or employed, and pastors have that dual tax status. So certainly a church that has ministry staff not ordained, they're paying FICA, the 7.65 for the employee, where the individual employee pays 7.65. Pastors have both sides of that equation, the 15.3. So if the church is not providing that second half for the pastor, we're encouraging that too. So those are just a few examples of how we can be advocates to the individual and advocates to the church and advocates to the presbytery to ensure that compensation is structured appropriately.
Right. So let's talk some of that for those pastors or pastors to be or sessions that don't understand that. And I'm calling it dual tax status. I don't know if that's an official term.
That's what we say as well. Yes.
Okay, good. So the basics of that is a normal employee you have in your church. For instance, like even in my own case, where I was a ruling elder on staff before I was a teaching elder. And so I went from being a normal employee of the church to an ordained pastor. The church can't keep paying me. I mean, they can do whatever they want, but like if they're paying me X amount of dollars, as soon as I become a pastor, they have to actually pay me more, because now I'm having to cover my own self-employment tax, what the organization would pay is the 7.65 as FICA, and the employee would pay the other 7.65 as a self-employed person. I have to pay 15.3%.
Right.
And so
you don't want it to be a situation of where, you were doing this job as a ministry, say a director of ministry. Now you're ordained, so we get a discount, church, because he's now going to pay his portion. You don't want that to happen. You want to gross up the salary, to adjust, apply for that SICA allowance, because you're having to do it for your FICA employees anyway.
Right. So there's no cost to the church. So in other words, if you're going to hire two people at the same time, like you said, a director of a ministry is at $75,000 a year and a pastor at $75,000 a year, you're going to need to pay that pastor 7.65% more. And I know there's a formula on how to actually get the right amount, but
right.
But because you're paying that for the non-ordained person already directly to the IRS. If you don't pay that to the pastor, they're going to have to pay that. And so it's like they're going to make less than you think.
Yes.
And most ruling elders wouldn't know that. It's you run your business, you never have that situation.
Right. The few that would is they have a business, they're self-employed themselves. If an elder on the session is familiar with SICA, but a lot of them haven't thought through that scenario that you reference, and so we're dealing with that.
The reason for that, Chet, is because it's not intuitive that, the pastor's receiving a check from the church, right, as opposed to a self-employed person that runs a business and then has to pay themselves, and so
Correct.
it's not necessarily intuitive.
Right. Well, and you're layering on the sort of the I'll call it hierarchy of needs regarding compensation that we have. You want to stay in Social Security if you've not opted out.
Wait, so
You want
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but explain that because you said
right.
it twice now. So explain it to what that most people don't know that even exists.
Yes, ministers have the ability to opt out of Social Security. It dates back to the 20s and 30s when Social Security was being developed. It was sort of an Amish or a Mennonite rule where they didn't want to rely on social programs. So the Congress at the time wrote in the ability for ministers to opt out of Social Security. We believe that a lot of the guys who are opting out, are not really fully aware of what it actually says in there. My theological belief is I should not rely on, for the purposes of ministry, rely on outside sources, the government funding. So we believe they're, first of all, they're not fully understanding or reading that. Secondly, we think there is a benefit, the social insurance that Social Security provides. Most of our country uses that. So it has that foundation. But if somebody has opted out of Social Security, we would just say, well, you need to save 25 to 30% of your income because you're not doing that 15%. Add that 15% to the 15% we tell people to save who are in Social Security. That's 30% of your income. That's a big number.
Right. So, yeah, again, like people think, well, if I opt out of Social Security as a pastor, I don't have to give the government 15.3% of my salary. I'm better at investing that than the government. But most people I know are not actually putting that into retirement. And then you're saying they should be doing that on top of what you already want them to
Right.
do.
Right, and it's not only the investing piece; it is the disability income, the disability benefit,
Mm.
the fact that it pays for Medicare Part A. So there's a lot of benefits that are there. You ministers who have opted out of Social Security can buy Part A, but if you've been in Social Security, you don't have to buy Part A. It's included as part of that. So there's a lot of issues that are around that. But we deal with people who have opted out. So we have to structure: is their wife has she worked? Will she get Social Security? Does the minister have employment from a secular job? 40 quarters? Are they already qualified? There will be some Social Security. So there's options for those guys, but get in the retirement program, save, and then obtain disability and life insurance. Those are the three benefits that we offer through Geneva: retirement, life, and disability, that are the most important things. Health insurance is another. We don't currently offer that, or we're looking at doing that. But the three we offer that are very, very important is that retirement, life, and disability insurance.
Okay. So, retirement. I mentioned to you that I started a 403b with y'all recently. And, I've always been a fan of the Roth IRA, and we can
Mm-hmm.
put so much in there. And so between me and my wife, we put so much, and now we're able to hopefully put more into a 403b. So those are pre-tax dollars. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, the traditional offering would be pre-tax dollars, but we also have a Roth 403b, so you can contribute after-tax dollars. We don't ordinarily recommend that for pastors because of the minister's housing allowance in retirement, and I can get to that. But for most employees, you can uh, contribute a pre-tax offering to the 403b. The church, the church's contribution is pre-tax, so both of those are pre-tax, which means if they've gone in pre-tax, they accrue without tax, and then once you distribute that, ordinarily they would be taxed at distribution, which is why a lot of people like the Roth. They say, I want to pay my tax on the front end, let it accrue tax free, and then on the back end, I'm not taxed. So that's great. Well, for ministers, and this is really unique, and a lot of people don't understand this, even in the investing world, and we have to explain it. Ministers get to include the portion that is related to housing allowance. While in retirement, the minister's no longer getting a housing allowance from their church, they're retired. So the distribution that they're receiving, the withdrawal they're getting out of the retirement plan, we declare 100% of that withdrawal, that distribution, as eligible for housing. So they have to go through the fair rental value, actual housing expenses, etc. But up to 100% of that distribution is eligible for housing. So if it had gone in tax deferred, pre-tax, then it comes out tax-free. Well, if you've already paid the tax on the front end, the Roth, it's going to come out tax-free anyway. So ministers may have paid more tax than they needed to, because they paid tax on the front end, got it in the plan, take it out tax-free. That's the Roth way. Well, the 403B pre-tax way with housing allowance, you put it in tax deferred, you take it out tax-free. So we can work through scenarios. We have financial planners on staff. Sometimes there's issues, family income issues, outside income issues that may make Roth a better answer. A lot of times for ministers, though, the pre-tax is a better answer.
Right. And that's what I've shared that with people in the PCA, and they had no idea that those 403B contributions can come out as housing allowance on the back end. Right. And that is huge, because many of us have been told and know, you put money in a Roth IRA, you pay the tax now, and then you'll never pay tax on that money. And so that's, if you have only have that much to put away, you go with the Roth IRA. But here with the 403B, you can actually now in retirement take a housing allowance and never pay tax on that money ever.
That's correct.
That's awesome. That's phenomenal.
Now, when the minister passes, that would be another thing. That same month, the housing allowance ends. So the widow of the pastor would not get the housing allowance. So that would be one offsetting caveat on the Roth portion. Obviously, if the housing allowance goes away, then the spouse, the widow, is no longer getting the housing allowance, and that would be a taxable distribution. If it had gone in Roth, there's no tax on the distribution. So those get to some of the intricacies that you have to think through.
Right. Do other 403B plans, not through Geneva Benefits, so if a church has, they have enough staff that they have their own, other company that does this, will they receive the same benefit of the housing allowance at distribution?
That's a great question. We're using a couple of IRS revenue rulings from the 60s and early 70s. The IRS have said they're not going to offer any more pronouncements on the minister's housing allowance at all. So they have not offered any other guidance or regulation in decades, as far as I know. But those 60s and 70s point to the denominational pension board or the denominational retirement board. They don't really reference other organizations. So, it may be theoretically possible for a church to work with an organization that has a 403B and the church itself is declaring the housing allowance. But that's a very hands-on approach that takes some knowledge from the local session, the local staff. Ordinarily, the way we see this is, PCA through the PCA retirement plan. If you're Methodist, through Westpath, for Baptist through Guidestone, and it has gone through the denominational pension board, is how that has how we feel like there's most legal guidance and protection.
So, right. So there you go. If you're going to have a 403B for your church, do it through Geneva Benefits. That's going to be, and then you get denominational support, denominational knowledge, and maybe this conversation will cause some people to open up 403.
Call. We have, I'm here. Our office, we have benefit advisors who talk about the various benefit offerings that we have. We have financial planning advisors, those who have a CFP or CRPC, that can talk through budgeting, investing, can kind of look at the family situation. We make an appointment. We can talk through that. We do that with individuals, with pastors, with ministry workers, with churches, and with we help support presbyteries in that too.
Okay. Back to the call package conversation. So y'all, you recommend, and I recommend grossing up a pastor's salary to cover that payroll tax
Right.
that the church would normally pay. Now the church isn't paying, so make sure the pastor has the ability to pay. What I've noticed in those call package guidelines that you've offered in the past is if you're providing a manse, what do you guys recommend if a church is providing a manse? I'll let you.
Well, great question. The manse is certainly helpful if the church has the house that's there, that's nearby. It's something that's certainly beneficial as a ministry offering, as part of the package that's there. The problem is when the pastor retires or leaves, or I know of a case where passed away and the widow was in the house. If they don't have any equity, then it's hard for them to buy. They can't sell the house and go buy another. So really having that housing allowance, or an equity allowance, as we would say, if there is a manse, to provide some sort of extra benefit, so the individual who's living here can accrue some sort of way of providing for their retirement or their next call, or in a case of a widow, where's she going to go? How's she going to buy a house when the pastor passes away and she's been living in this manse? So that equity allowance portion is what they were talking about. Of course, all of this is related to what can the church afford?
Right,
and
right.
You need to assess. We've worked with churches. In order to afford this person, do you need a smaller staff? Are you doing some things that could be restructured where you can make it more tax advantage, where you can, instead of giving a pool of money or a package of money, we can pay for some things by the church, which would raise that net income for the individual. But there's going to be some balancing depending on where you are financially as an organization. So it can be challenging for some churches to say, well, we just don't have any more money. Then you're having to look, well, what are we doing here? Is there anything that we can restructure here? Different size staff, different financial structure where we can make it, raise the net salary for that individual.
Yeah, that's a great point, because when I've seen that in your call package guidelines, I'm like, oh, theoretically that makes sense. So as part of the pastor's compensation, you're giving them a house valued at $20,000, $30,000, whatever a year, and that saves the church that money. But yeah, that person has no equity to then go roll into their own home one day. And so the recommendation to have an equity portion or line item in the, right. But of course, most churches in this situation where they have a manse, they're using that for a savings. They don't have the extra, I don't know what percent
right.
you recommend,
Well,
$10,000 a year,
Yeah, Westminster here in Atlanta, it's a 100-year-old church. So we do have some resources, having been around for a while, and we have a manse, but we use it as a ministry or organization. We have someone living there now as a benefit, not our pastor. Our pastors, our 3 pastors that we have on staff, have their own houses. So we give them a housing allowance. We provide housing for them. They have houses in the Atlanta area. And then the manse that we actually have adjacent to the church on church property is used for other ministry purposes.
Yeah, that's good. And what I would say is, some of this, again, you've said this, and I've been saying, like, the budget of the church's budget is what it is, but it's good to be aware of it as a session, as ruling elders, as you're talking about how to care for your teaching elders and how to provide for them through compensation. That it is a great benefit that you offer them this beautiful house on the property, but you got to recognize that they're not building equity. for their
Right.
future. And
Right.
that's not saying what you've done is wrong. I think that's the only way a lot of churches can get. And it also, in a lot of cases, the manse, I mean, we've heard some horror stories about manses, but there's also some manses that are much nicer house than the pastor would be able to afford anyway. And so
Oh,
you know,
true. Yeah.
so it's not, it's just ruling elders and sessions need to be aware of these things in the life of a family that you're wanting to call to minister in your congregation. These are differences
Right.
between
And we
that and the
want
real.
I'm a ruling elder on my session. I'm stated clerk of my session. I have ministry responsibilities at Westminster in addition to being at Geneva. And so for those ruling elders who are listening to this or watching this, and they are, I know they are, they're involved in their churches to understand how they can support their pastor, their ministry staff, what can they do as a group of men who are making financial decisions to help support the staff, but also what they can they do service wise, not just making decisions, but how can they help in the ministry of the church, the shepherding of the church, to help support the pastoral staff that are there to uh, shepherd the flock.
Mm. And you know what is interesting to me is as housing values have grown over the years and inflation, it's actually a benefit to churches to have their pastors in houses earlier.
Yes.
And the way I've seen this is we've been in a home for 20 years. So we've had multiple homes and that equity just rolls over and we've been able to take advantage of the best interest rates over the 20 years. And pastor friends of mine that don't own their home,
Yes.
they're having to make $15,000 to $20,000 more a year to pay for a home they finally buy or rent. Like they're literally paying twice what I'm paying for, in a lot of cases, a smaller place. And it's because I'm in the market much, much longer and earlier. And
Right.
so,
And with the minister's housing allowance, the housing allowance will allow you to make a portion of your salary that is not taxable. So you won't have to pay income taxes on it. You do. There are other taxes that are associated with that, obviously,
yeah.
but no income taxes, and that allows you to have your investments not in real estate as well as the market, the stock and bond market, where you can have a portfolio of retirement here, but you also have real estate. Now, so it's a way to diversify a little bit. Now there are expenses, replacing a roof, getting a new air conditioner, maintaining it can be challenging maintaining a house, but certainly there can be financial benefits also.
Right. And so you just brought up another point back to that dual tax status that so for Social Security purposes, and like I said, Medicare and all that, you're treated as a self-employed employee. But for federal income tax purposes, your housing, whatever you declare as a housing allowance and your session votes on, is not taxed.
Correct.
And you said this to me before the call, and I of course know it, but I'd like everybody to hear it. Just because your session says, let's say your session votes at the end of the year to give you a $24,000 housing allowance, what happens at tax time a year later, Chet, with that $24,000?
Well, a lot of that is determined by the individual who's filing his taxes. I mean, when you look at the fair rental value of the home, furnished plus utilities, the actual housing expenses, and you can add in a lot of things. What did it cost to maintain this house, and then the amount. We never want the third thing to be the lowest. The amount the session has declared as housing allowance. But, it's fine to be aggressive in that, but you have to be careful because that's all housing. So if you go too aggressive on how much a church lists as your housing allowance, it's going to constrain the amount of money you have to fund other things like a retirement contribution. I worked with a guy one time who 100% of his salary was housing allowance, and he was trying to contribute to the retirement plan. I was like, how are you doing that? You were telling us you have no money other than housing money. well, his wife worked, and I said, well, you can't contribute her money to the retirement plan. It has to be your money. So
Mm.
he ended up reducing his housing allowance a little bit so he could contribute to the retirement plan.
Yeah, and so that's a good point that I've learned too as I opened up the 403b. You can't contribute money. You have to get money in your check for your housing allowance, or again, if it's a manse, that's a different story. You can't use that money then in a tax deferred plan because that money is already not going to be taxed.
Right. It's money from, yeah. It's income, salary earned. It's earned income from ministerial employment is what you can contribute, what the individual can contribute. I'm a ruling elder, so it's my employment here. It's earned income. If I were to inherit some money, I can't contribute that money to the plan. I could say increase my own contribution and kind of live off the inheritance and the money that I make here contribute that, but I can't take that inheritance and roll it into the plan.
Right, right. And so what I have on the screen now is just one of 3 worksheets, depending on your living situation, that Geneva Benefits provides. And what I really appreciate about you guys, I mean, you're a business, but you're there to serve us, but there's no benefit to these call package guidelines and housing allowance worksheets they're just there as resources to help the
Right.
church.
Help you think through what type of expenses are we talking about here? What can I include this? Can I include that? And we list several things that people should be thinking about in what's there. Of course, you have to buy milk and bread too. So you want to be as aggressive as you feel like you can be on some of these expenses because that means it's not taxable for income tax purposes, but you still have to have money to drive cars with, fuel cars with, and bread and milk too.
Right. And so is it a safe rule of thumb to say, declare at the beginning in your session meeting, for the next year, as much like over, no, because you don't want to owe the money. What's your guidance on how much, like how people should plan for that?
Well, if you're not in a manse, certainly your home payment and your utility payments, just look at that as a basic item. I mean, what you're going to have to pay that. Then you can add in some other things. Our worksheets help you think through those other items. But those are going to be actual. If you know you're going to be spending that money, you might as well go ahead and include it in your calculation of your housing allowance. We don't have a specific number or percentage, at least I don't, talking with my financial planners, I don't know if they have a rule of thumb, but from the standpoint of if you know you will have these expenses that will be housing related, go ahead and declare that because that will be tax free. If you're not sure or if you don't know, you're going to have to pay taxes on that anyway. At the end of the year, because if you don't end up paying that on the house, but the things that that you're going to be paying, go ahead and declare that, include that in what you declare ahead of time. And it's always perspective; it's always looking out. So if you under declare, you can ask the session mid-year to say, "Hey, can you increase it?" At that point, they can increase it, not for anything you made earlier in the year, but certainly for the rest of the year going forward.
That's helpful, and I didn't realize. I assumed you could do that, but I thought you were kind of tied to. And then at the end of the year, when you file your taxes, you have to, fill out a worksheet and see what it is, and if you underspent, so if you had declared 30,000 and you only spent 28,000, then you're going to have to pay
correct
the taxes on the 2,000, and accountants can help you.
That's correct.
Help you with that. What I'd also say is if you have an expense that is coming, like let's say it's November and that in January you're going to replace your refrigerator and a few major appliances, well then
right.
That might increase the allowance you take. It probably will, or a roof,
absolutely.
For instance.
You also have to look at the fair rental value furnished plus utilities. So you can't you can't go crazy on how much that's there, but so you have those 3 limiting factors: the amount you declare, your actual expenses, and that fair rental value of the home.
So fair rental value, that's even on a home you own?
Correct. Yes. So what you're doing is what would a house rent for in my area, then furnish it, and then pay utilities. And if you can find real estate agents or various websites in different areas may tell you what housing would rent for in that area, you could say this is what we think the fair rental value for a house similar size to ours, furnished plus utilities, would be. And as long as that number is above the number you've expensed, then or you experienced or the session, then you go with the least of those three numbers, whether it's the amount
Gotcha.
you declared, your actual expenses, or the fair rental value.
Right. And so there it is on your worksheet too. Okay, let's shift gears. So we've talked a little bit about the insurance, the retirement plan, the 403B plan
Sure.
that y'all offer. And, that could be for one employee. You just set it up. I set mine up. It took, a week. And we've talked call package guidance and housing allowance worksheet guidance, which is just a service that you provide. You guys
Correct.
give good guidance there. What are some of the other services that you sell and provide that pastors can take advantage of?
Well, employee benefit insurance, so life insurance, disability, vision, dental. Disability side, we have long-term disability and short-term disability. The main two that I would emphasize are life insurance and long-term disability insurance. Obviously, there are accessed either through Geneva or through private sources, websites, etc., on life insurance. Uh, you need to have life insurance. Secondly, disability. It's really challenging to get long-term disability insurance except through an employer like an employer access like Geneva. We do recommend long-term disability insurance if you were to get a disabling either disease or accident that where you can't work and you're in mid-career, uh, in your 40s, disability is 3 times more likely than death. And so you need long-term disability insurance. We also offer short-term. A lot of churches self-insure. That's fine. It's not nearly as important as long-term disability insurance. And we also have vision and dental insurance. We don't have a health insurance offering at this time, but we're exploring different opportunities with various organizations and vendors out there in the space, and we hope to be able to offer one as a possibility in the future.
Okay. So, by the way, for listeners, like the short-term disability option, what is the time frame typically viewed as short-term?
Yeah, long-term starts at 3 months. So if you're going to be disabled or unable to work for a period of 3 months or longer, that's long-term disability insurance. Basically, your deductible is they don't cover you until the third month. So it has to be a pretty serious condition that would keep you from working. So that's long-term disability. Short-term is anything 2 weeks to 3 months. So short-term disability takes you up to that 3 month mark.
Right.
Sometimes a maternity issue for moms who are working. There could be a disease, some sort of a minor accident that's serious. I don't want to say a minor accident that's serious. An accident that's not long term, but kind of a longer than a couple of weeks. Those are the things that are short term. A lot of churches can self-insure that through sick time, vacation time. But if you're a small organization, say, listen, our pastor can't. What are we going to do? If we're going to pay this pastor who can't work, we're going to have to go, get stated supply somewhere. How are we going to fund that? Because we're also paying this pastor. Well, short-term disability can kind of plug that gap where, okay, you don't have to pay that pastor because they're getting short-term disability benefits. We can use the money you were paying your pastor to go find some stated supply to preach while that pastor is ill.
Right. And by self-insure, you just mean the church has assumes the risk of
Correct.
that 3
Correct.
month period. Worst case scenario, they just keep paying the pastor and
Correct.
incur the other expenses other ways. But for anything longer than 3 months, I mean, that would be hard for a church to keep paying. So what percent do your long-term disability plans pay?
It pays approximately 2/3, and then it gives a 9% contribution to the retirement plan. So I'm describing our enhanced disability. We have a basic and a voluntary benefit too that are structured a little bit differently, but our premier product is 66 and 2/3 of your pre-disability income that includes your salary and your housing allowance, and then it contributes 9% on top of that 66 and 2/3 to the retirement plan. It has a COLA, a cost of living adjustment on that, and it also provides your income up to your normal Social Security retirement age, so 67, etc.
So that the 9% or whatever percent you mentioned for the retirement, I mean, that assumes you doesn't assume, it means you have to have a Geneva Benefits retirement plan, right?
No, you don't.
Really? Okay.
It's a retirement. If you don't have us, you have another plan. It's a 9% contribution to a retirement device, like another organization or some sort of retirement vehicle, like an IRA.
Okay. Now, who, in your experience, pays for the long-term disability, the church or the individual?
Well, that's a great question. It could be either. We like to structure that where the church is paying for that as what we call a taxable fringe benefit. The church pays for the premium, but then includes on the W-2 of the pastor, of the individual or ministry worker, a gross up of the tax for that. So I would have to pay just the tax on what the premium that the church has paid for my benefit. So the church pays the premium, and then they say, I gave Chet $100 worth of benefit, and so then I'm paying taxes as if I had received $100. If it's taxed like that, that means on the back end, the disability payment is not taxable. But if the individual didn't pay any taxes on the benefit or the premium, then they have to pay taxes on the disability benefit when they get disabled. So it would reduce that 2/3 by the amount of the tax. So we think it's very important for the church to structure it where they're paying the premium, and then the individual employee then pays the taxes on the amount of what that premium was, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and the church can opt, if they have the kind of budget, they can opt to gross up the salary to cover
Correct.
so it in effect it costs the employee nothing. But I didn't realize it would be taxable to begin with.
It has to be taxable at some point, either on the front end or on the back end, just like the Roth. It's a government funding vehicle, so they have to determine how the tax calculation is going to be. And if churches, they can convert. If they're doing it one way, they can convert the other, and then there's a what they call a look back period. The carrier will look back 36 months to see who paid what tax. And so churches who are having the individual pay for it can switch where the church is paying for it, and then that would ultimately be to their benefit if they ever were disabled.
What did we miss? We've done 403Bs. We've done long-term disability, call packages, housing allowances, tax status. What else do y'all?
We also are growing out our ministerial well-being division. We've had ministerial relief since 1973. We've had the relief fund. People say the widow's fund, the widow's offering, disabled pastors who ran out of disability, didn't have disability, people who just have run out of retirement money, widows, etc. We've had that since the founding of the denomination. What we're seeking to grow is pastoral and ministerial well-being. How are churches supporting, beyond financially, how are churches able to support and encourage and grow the minister. So the emotional well-being, just the spiritual well-being of a lot of the pastors. So we're trying to grow out that aspect of our ministry by offering things like sabbatical matching funds and pilot programs for uh, peer cohorts and kind of well-being assessments. These are very, very early stages. We're trialing some of this with some folks, but that is an area that we're really trying to grow in Geneva.
So I went on your site, and there it is. Let's see. I like that. Schedule a consultation. So, and that would be what I would advise for any kind of questions. Is it can be daunting to think through a lot of this stuff, but y'all are very willing to help.
Absolutely. And the counseling for pastor's wife, our cherished program, we've had that. We had counseling for other employees as well, for ministers and other employees. We had to take a couple of steps back and retreat on that because of that organization not being able to keep up with the demand. We're looking at other possibilities for counseling. We've partnered with GCN to help us counsel on the pastors' wives. We have connections to organizations, not only GCN, but also CCEF and other counseling groups where we can help people. But we're also trying to build up these other non-counseling areas for pastoral well-being too.
Okay. That's great. Which agency are you under in the denomination?
We are an agency.
Okay.
So
all right.
The agencies are the Foundation, Covenant College, Covenant Seminary, Ridgehaven, and us, Geneva Benefits Group.
What were you called before again? Because that's when I was ordained, you weren't Geneva Benefits. That's why it's not ringing.
We were PCA Retirement and Benefits.
Yes, RBI. Okay. What kind of fundraising do you need or do? I mean, people are listening to this, and so, yeah.
Well, we're ministerial relief. The relief organization is the main part. We're a church organization, so we can receive donations really for anything that we do. But our concentration, our fundraising efforts are really for relief, cherish, our programs, charitable programs that we help with the financial piece or the counseling piece for people. We've hit historically that was the Christmas relief offering. We still do that, but we're raising money now all year long, not just at Christmas. So we'll have programs through social feeds, social media, emails, fundraising efforts that we run. And that's the vast majority of what we're raising money for. We also were blessed to receive a Lilly Endowment grant a couple of years ago, where we're trying to flesh out some ministry offerings under the pastoral and ministerial well-being resources. So we have received some of those funds, and really we could take donations for anything that we do, but the vast majority of it is for relief.
Yes, thank you. I love your website, by the way.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I find it very easy to use, very easy to find things, and very helpful. And I've directed pastors to it when they're a lot of times pastors are, especially the way inflation has gone in recent years, and they're trying, most pastors feel bad to ask for a raise that would be above what they normally would get. And yet more and more I'm hearing pastors need that, and they don't know really how to approach it with their session. And I usually send them information. Like at the end of every year, you guys usually have a blog post that talk about inflation rates and COLA, cost of living, and other things. And I just say, well, your session loves you. Have them read some of this stuff.
And we've set appointments, meetings. We've talked with sessions before. We can do that. We talk with the pastors. A lot of pastors' wives may do the household budget, so we'll talk with them as well. And we'll have both on a phone call, and we'll go through different things. We'll have if we need to present or call in, have some sort of meeting with a session as well. And we primarily do that through our retirement readiness team. But yes, we've tried to help people in all sorts of situations.
Right. And I love what you said at the beginning of this whole thing. There may be ways to structure both the church operationally or a call package to be in the benefit of the pastor and the church from a tax standpoint and from other standpoints. And so there's just things we don't always think through. And so there, in a sense, you guys act as consultants in that also.
Right. Yeah. This is a number of years ago now, but there was a very small church that really, really could not afford a full-time pastor. And we worked with the church and the individual. Turned out to be a bivocational area where the pastor was gifted in another area. So the pastor was able to get some benefits and some compensation from working this outside job, this side job, but also be a minister in that congregation. We don't want a lot of double work or bivocational ministries out there, certainly. But this was a very small church, did not have the resources, but it was a kind of a creative solution that we were able to help in trying to think through different things that they could do.
Oh, that's great. And that's guidance I often give younger pastors or pastors that are feeling the economic pinch. And it's easy to become a little bitter about maybe what you're being paid. And what I always say is, yeah, a family of 5 like yours needs to make more, but your church only has what it has. You're a solo pastor. They're not trying to begrudge you what you're due. They don't have it. And I think part of the problem, if you're on a session and you're listening to this, is every church wants the younger pastor with the large family because, we're going to attract families because this pastor has a
Right.
family. And I think sessions need to be realistic about, can you really afford to support a family such that that family feels secure and can
Right.
minister in your context? Because if not,
And do
you
you
may
want them
want
to
a
be
young
there?
family.
Yeah. Do you want them in your community? I mean, for
Right.
for city churches or larger city churches, where do you want that person to live? Do you want them to live in the community near the church, or are you going to ask them to drive in 20, 30 miles away because they can't afford anything near the church? So you have
Right.
to look. You have to look at all of those metrics that for that situation.
Right. And I say you might need to be realistic that you might need an empty nester pastor that's not trying to raise a family, or a pastor that's semi-retired. I mean, you can't bring a guy in with a family and they can't really, afford to live that way. And so I think there needs to be a reality check on both sides sometimes. So
Yes, exactly. Yes.
yeah. Well, Chet, this has been a great conversation. I really think it will be helpful, and I hope it will be. Is there anything else that we missed that you want to share, or is there anything you want to say to anybody, or tell us how we can connect with you at GA?
Well, we will have a booth right up near the front. A lot of the agencies and committees of the PCA have larger booths near the front because we help fund certainly the actions of the General Assembly for the exhibit hall and other things. So come visit us there at General Assembly. Call us, look for our website, genevabenefits.org, and schedule a call with one of our financial planners if you wish. Talk with one of our benefit advisors. Take a look at our website. Let us know how we can help you.
That's perfect. Chet, I appreciate you. I'll say hi at GA, and thanks. Yeah, thank you for how you serve us. Yes. So this is Pastor George signing off for Presbyterian and Reformed Churchmen.
The heart of BTS is first and foremost to be faithful. Faithful to the Word of God, to the sufficiency of Scripture, to knowing we serve a sovereign Lord. The second component of the heart of BTS is accessibility. We're affordable, we're flexible, we work with students to help them achieve goals. This isn't our journey, it's your journey for serving the Lord. It's your journey that God has called you to. So we pray that while God expands and grows the opportunities that we have, that we never lose sight to provide quality, Reformed theological education, faithfully and accessibly, so that we can serve the local church by building leaders for His kingdom.